The average used car buyer overpays by $2,500, and most of them never find out. Not because they got a bad car, because nobody taught them how to actually look at one. Japan figured this out before we did. Every used car sold there gets inspected panel by someone who has zero stake in the sale, and graded on a scale so strict that a single bad paint job can knock thousands off the price before it ever reaches a lot. That system exists because Japanese law forces it. You don't have that law protecting you, but you can steal the method. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how a Japanese inspector reads a car in under an hour, and how to use that same process on your next test drive before you sign anything. The math behind why Japan's system exists. Here's the part most people get wrong about Japan's car market. They think it's about culture. It's not. It's about money, and once you understand the money, the whole system makes sense. Japan runs a mandatory inspection called Sheikin. Every car owner pays it every 2 years, and the price climbs with the age of the car. A brand new car's first Sheikin is cheap, sometimes free for the first 3 years. By year 10, an owner can be looking at $1,500 to $3,000 just to keep a car legal to drive. That's not a tune-up, that's a full inspection covering brakes, suspension, exhaust, emissions, structural integrity, and dozens of other points, done by a licensed facility that has no financial reason to pass a car that shouldn't pass. So think about the decision a Japanese car owner faces at year 9. Their car is worth maybe $4,000 on the market. Sheikin renewal is going to cost $2,500. The math doesn't work, they sell. Multiply that by millions of owners making the same calculation every year, and you get a used car market flooded with vehicles that were sold not because something was wrong with them, but because the numbers stopped making sense for the original owner. That's the piece nobody tells you. A used JDM car isn't usually a car someone got rid of because they didn't want it anymore. It's a car someone got rid of because the government made keeping it too expensive to justify. That's a completely different kind of used car than what you're used to seeing on an American lot, where people typically sell because something's wearing out or they want something newer. Now here's where it gets useful for you. You don't have Sheikin in America. Nobody's gonna force a seller to prove their car passes a structural inspection every 2 years, which means the burden falls on you. You have to become your own Sheikin inspector. That sounds intimidating, but the actual checklist Japanese inspectors use isn't complicated. It's just thorough, and thorough is something anyone can learn to do. It's also worth knowing where all those Japanese cars actually go once Sheikin pushes an owner to sell. A huge share get exported, and the destination matters. Countries with looser import restrictions and driving on the same side of the road, places like New Zealand and parts of the Caribbean and Southeast Asia, absorb enormous numbers of JDM vehicles every year. The United States is a smaller piece of that pipeline because of import age restrictions, but 25-year rule means older JDM models are increasingly landing on American soil as they cross that threshold. When you see a genuinely low mileage, meticulously kept Japanese import at a specialty dealer here, that scarcity is exactly why it costs what it costs. The car isn't rare because it's special. It's rare because it survived a system designed to push it out of the market early, and someone paid to bring it across an ocean. Reading an auction sheet like an inspector. Every car that goes through a Japanese auction gets what's called an auction sheet. It's 1 page. And that 1 page tells you more than a Carfax, a dealer walk-around, and a 15-minute test drive combined. The sheet starts with an overall grade, and here's what most people online get wrong when they explain this. They treat the grade like a simple number, but it's actually a snapshot of interior and exterior condition together, not one or the other. A car graded 4.5 has light exterior wear and a clean interior. A car graded 4 might look fine outside, but have visible interior wear, or the reverse. You have to read both halves. Below the grade, the sheet has a diagram of the car from above, broken into panels: hood, front bumper, both front fenders, both doors, both rear fenders, rear bumper, trunk, roof. Each panel gets its own code. A scratch gets one code, a dent gets another, a repainted panel gets a different one entirely. And here's the detail most explainers skip. The codes also indicate severity, not just type. A small letter often means minor. A number after it often means it needs correction before resale. An inspector isn't just noting that damage exists, they're noting whether it's cosmetic or structural, and whether it's been addressed or ignored. The reason this matters for you isn't so you can read Japanese auction codes, it's so you understand the underlying principle. Every flaw gets recorded individually instead of averaged into one vague impression. That's the opposite of how most Americans shop for cars. We walk around a vehicle, form a general feeling, it looks pretty good, and buy based on that feeling. A trained inspector never does that. They separate the car into zones and evaluate each zone on its own, because damage in one specific zone, like the shock towers or the frame rails, matters infinitely more than damage in a zone like the rear bumper cover. So build your own version of this. Before you ever go look at a car, sketch a simple top-down outline. 10 zones: hood, both front fenders, both front doors, both rear fenders, trunk, roof. When you inspect a car, you're not walking around forming a feeling. You're filling in 10 boxes with specific notes. That single habit change will catch more problems than any app, any report, or any amount of general car knowledge. The physical checklist. Most buyers skip entirely. There's a sequence trained inspectors follow, and the order matters because it moves from the areas most likely to reveal a lie to the areas that just show ordinary wear. Start at the shock towers under the hood. These are the structural mounting points for the front suspension, and they are almost never repaired well after a real collision because doing it correctly requires specialized equipment most body shops don't have. Look for ripples in the metal, inconsistent paint texture, or weld marks that look different from the factory welds around them. Factory welds are uniform and machine applied. Repair welds are done by hand, and they look like it if you know what you're looking at. Move to the radiator support, directly behind the front bumper. It should be perfectly straight. A bent or replaced radiator support almost always means a frontal impact significant enough to matter. Next, the panel gaps. This is the single easiest check for a beginner to learn, because you don't need any tools, just your eyes and a little patience. Stand at the front corner of the car and look down the seam between the hood and the fender. Factory gaps are consistent in width from one end to the other. If the gap is wider at the top than the bottom, or wider on one side of the car than the other, that panel has been off the car at some point. Check every seam this way: hood to fender, door to quarter panel, trunk to quarter panel. This one technique alone will catch the majority of collision repairs that a seller doesn't mention. Now go to the door jambs. Open every door and look at the sticker on the driver's door frame. It lists the original paint code and the VIN. If that sticker looks newer than the rest of the jam, or if the paint in the jam doesn't match the paint code, someone repainted that door and didn't want you to know. Check for overspray next, and this is a detail almost nobody teaches. When a shop repaints a panel, a fine mist of paint drifts beyond the edge of what they're working on. It lands on rubber seals, on weather stripping, inside wheel wells, on plastic trim. Original factory rubber has a slightly matte, uniform texture. Overspray leaves rubber looking slightly glossy or speckled in a way that doesn't match the surrounding material. Run your finger along the door seals. If one seal feels different from the others, that's your answer. Get underneath the car if you can, even just with a flashlight and your phone held low. Look at the floor pans. Light surface rust is normal on an older car, especially anywhere road salt gets used. What's not normal is rust that looks like it's bubbling up from underneath in patches, or a floor pan that's been patched with a visibly different piece of metal. Both of those point toward flood damage, or a car that lives somewhere it took real damage. Last, check the tires and pedals against the odometer. This is a gut check that takes 10 seconds. A car showing 30,000 miles should not have a steering wheel worn shiny and smooth, brake and gas pedals worn down to bare metal at the edges, or tires already at half their tread life unless they've clearly been replaced. Where that doesn't match the mileage is one of the strongest signs of a rolled back odometer, and it's a check almost nobody does because it takes real attention to notice. Two tools make this checklist dramatically more accurate, and neither one costs much. The first is a cheap magnet, the kind you'd stick on a fridge. Body filler isn't magnetic, but sheet metal is. Run the magnet lightly along a panel you're suspicious of, wrapped in a cloth so it doesn't scratch the paint. If it slides across a section without pulling toward the metal the way it does everywhere else, there's filler under that paint. And filler means body work happened, whether the seller mentions it or not. The second tool is a paint thickness gauge, and you can find a basic one online for well under $50. Factory paint sits within a fairly consistent thickness range across the entire car, usually somewhere in the 4 to 6 mil range, depending on the manufacturer. Run the gauge across every panel and write the readings on your 10-zone diagram. A panel reading significantly thicker than the rest of the car has extra paint layers on it, which almost always means a repaint. This is exactly the kind of measurement Japanese inspectors take for granted and American buyers never even know exists. Documentation, where most people stop too early. Most buyers think checking documentation means pulling up a Carfax on their phone in the driveway and calling it done. That's not verification. That's a single data point, and single data points can be wrong. Here's something worth knowing that doesn't get talked about enough. Carfax and AutoCheck don't pull from identical sources. They're both built from state DMV records, insurance claims, and repair shop reports, but the reporting relationships aren't the same, which means a car can show completely clean on one and show a branded title on the other. Neither report is complete. Both are estimates built from whatever data happened to get reported. Treat them as a starting point, never as proof of anything. The deeper issue is something called title washing, and if you're a first-time buyer, this is the single most important concept in this entire video. Title branding laws vary significantly by state. A car totaled in a state with strict branding laws can be purchased at salvage auction, transported to a state with looser rules, retitled there, and come out the other side with what looks like a completely clean title. The damage happened. The paperwork just doesn't reflect it anymore because it passed through a jurisdiction that didn't require the brand to carry over. This is completely legal in a lot of cases, and it happens constantly with vehicles that get shipped across state lines specifically because of it. The way you protect yourself is by requesting the full title history, not just the current title. Every state the car was registered in should show up in a complete vehicle history report. If you see a car that was titled in one state, then briefly in a totally different state, then back to where you're buying it, ask why. That pattern by itself isn't proof of anything, but it's a reason to ask harder questions. Then there's service records, and this is where the Japanese comparison really matters. In Japan, every Shaken inspection gets logged in a maintenance booklet that stays with the car for its entire life. A buyer there expects to see years of documented service before they even consider a purchase. In America, we don't have that culture, but you can still demand the equivalent. Ask for maintenance receipts, ask for oil change records, ask if the car has ever been serviced at a dealership, because dealership service history is usually tied to the VIN and can sometimes be pulled independently of what the seller hands you. A seller who owned the car for 5 years and has zero paperwork to show for it either didn't maintain the car or doesn't want you to see what the maintenance revealed. There's one more check most first-time buyers don't even know exists, and it can save you from losing the car entirely after you've paid for it. A lien check. Before you hand over money, verify there's no outstanding loan attached to the vehicle. If a seller still owes money on the car and doesn't pay off the loan at the time of sale, the lien holder can legally repossess a car you already paid for because the loan was never actually settled. This happens more than people realize with private sales, specifically because buyers assume a clean-looking title means there's no debt attached to it, and that's not always true. Pair the lien check with the VIN itself. Run the VIN through the National Insurance Crime Bureau's free lookup tool, which will tell you if the vehicle has ever been reported stolen or flagged in an insurance claim as a total loss, information that doesn't always make it into a standard Carfax pull. And finally, get an independent pre-purchase inspection, not the seller's mechanic, not a friend who's good with cars. A shop with zero relationship to the seller, paid by you with the only job of telling you the truth. This single step costs somewhere between $100 and $200, and it will save you from the majority of expensive mistakes a private buyer makes. Skipping this step to save $100 on a $15,000 purchase is the most common financial mistake first-time car buyers make. Full stop. Turning what you found into an actual number. This is the part where the Japanese system pulls ahead of basically every other approach to car buying, and it's the part American buyers almost never do correctly. In Japan, the grade sets the price. A grade 5 car and a grade 4 car of the same model and mileage will sell for meaningfully different amounts, because the grade already accounts for the condition difference. There's very little haggling over vague impressions, because the inspection already did the work of quantifying the condition. You can build the same discipline into a private sale. Every flaw you find during your inspection gets converted into a dollar figure before you ever say a word to the seller. Worn tires aren't just the tires look kind of worn. They're a $600 to $1,000 replacement cost, and you write that number down. Brake pads sitting at 30% aren't a vague concern. They're a specific repair bill, and you price it out before the conversation happens. A repainted quarter panel isn't just something you noticed. It's a documented repair that drops the car from what the seller is calling excellent condition to something closer to average. An average condition doesn't command the price they're asking. By the time you're ready to talk numbers, you should have a list, and every item on it should have a dollar figure attached. That list is your leverage, and it works because you're not negotiating on feeling anymore. You're presenting evidence. A seller can argue with, "I don't love the price." A seller has a much harder time arguing with a documented repair, a mechanic's written estimate, and a specific number that adds up. What this actually sounds like in person. It's one thing to hear the checklist, it's another to know what to actually say when you're standing next to the car with the seller watching you. Here's roughly how that conversation goes when you've done the work. You open with a price objection, you open with a question, because questions get you information a statement never will. Something like, "Has this ever had any paint or bodywork done?" Watch the answer closely, not just the words. A seller who says, "Not that I know of," while you're already looking at a panel gap that's clearly off by a few millimeters has just told you two things. Either they genuinely don't know their own car's history, which is its own red flag, or they do know and they're hoping you won't ask. From there, you walk them through what you found, calmly and specifically, not "this car has problems." That's vague, and vague invites an argument. Instead, the gap between this door and the fender is wider at the bottom than the top, which usually means this panel's been off before. The paint thickness reading here is also about 2 mils higher than the rest of the car. That typically points to a repair in this area. You're not accusing anyone of lying, you're stating what the evidence shows and letting them respond to specifics instead of vibes. Then you move to cost. Assuming this was a minor repair and not structural, that's not necessarily a deal breaker for me, but it does mean this isn't the flawless car the listing described, so I'd want to reflect that in the price. At this point, most honest sellers will either explain what actually happened, which is useful information either way, or they'll acknowledge the point and the price conversation becomes straightforward. If a seller gets defensive, evasive, or suddenly can't remember details about their own car's history, that reaction tells you more than anything on the panel itself. The tire and brake numbers work the same way. Tires are around 4/32, so they've got some life left, but the fronts are wearing unevenly, which could mean an alignment issue. Figure 600 to replace them properly and get the alignment checked at the same time. You're not asking for a discount because you feel like it. You're asking because you've priced out exactly what you'll need to spend the week after you buy the car, and that number is real money coming out of your pocket regardless of what the sticker price says. If at any point a seller refuses to let you do a proper inspection, refuses an independent mechanic's visit, or gets impatient with basic questions about maintenance history, that's the whole answer right there. A seller with nothing to hide has no reason to rush you. Why this actually matters more for a first car than any other purchase. Here's something worth sitting with. The information gap in a used car sale isn't evenly distributed. A seller who's owned the car for years knows things about it that no report will ever capture. The squeak that shows up on cold mornings, the transmission that hesitates going into third gear, the accident they never filed a claim for because it was minor enough to pay out of pocket. Dealers know their average profit margin runs somewhere in the low thousands per vehicle, and a meaningful chunk of that margin exists specifically because most buyers don't know what to look for. A first-time buyer or a family working with a tight budget doesn't have room for a $5,000 mistake. There's no equity in a previous trade-in to soften a bad decision. There's no financial cushion to absorb an unexpected transmission replacement 6 months in, which means the inspection habits that feel like overkill for someone buying their 4th or 5th car are actually the most important habits for someone buying their first. There's also a psychological shift that happens once you start using this method, and it's worth naming directly. Most first-time buyers walk onto a lot feeling like the least informed person in the conversation, which puts them at a disadvantage before a single word gets exchanged. The moment you show up with a 10-zone diagram, a magnet, a paint gauge, and specific questions about title history, that dynamic flips. You stop being someone hoping the seller is honest and start being someone who doesn't need to rely on hope at all, because you can verify almost everything that matters yourself. A seller can sense that shift within the first few minutes, and it changes how the entire interaction goes, usually toward more honesty and less pressure. The good news is, none of what you just learned requires special equipment or years of mechanical experience. It requires slowing down, breaking the car into zones instead of forming one general impression, checking gaps and jams and welds in the right order, verifying paperwork past a single app, and converting every flaw into a real number before you ever open your mouth to negotiate. That's the entire method. Japan built an entire regulatory system around forcing that discipline. You just have to build the habit yourself.